Long time no talk, my lovely loyal listeners. I'd like to give a hearty welcome to all of those who have joined us in the time that I've taken this hiatus, and a thank you to all of you who are returning. I know it's been a few months since I've last graced your car speakers or earbuds, but I am happy to report that What Do You Know About is back. We are going to be taking longer between each episode in order to keep my energy levels as balanced as possible so that I can bring you the best episodes and hopefully keep them as scheduled as possible. So probably about once or twice a month, keep a lookout on your favorite podcast platform for new interesting pieces of history from me, your lowly Canadian at-home research nerd who just loves to tell anyone willing to listen to these usually grim stories. And on that note, there's another piece of fun information about our return, as it isn't just myself who's back, but it's going to be double the trouble again on most episodes, as Kat is also back pretty much for good.
Ideally, hopefully, as long as nothing else goes wrong.
As long as you don't do any more moves or change more jobs
as long as I don't move across the province again, as long as like my actual like life stability kind of like continues to level out.
Yeah, pretty much.
No more major life changes for me for a while.
So we'll sometimes have the double research episodes, and sometimes we'll have solo episodes. So like today will be a solo research episode. Next week we're gonna have a double research episode. So kind of doing kind of a mix of fun stuff.
Yeah, we'll keep you on your toes.
Exactly. And then we also have some other fun news to share, as we actually have our first affiliate as well. Honestly, I am super excited to announce that we're working with the amazing Leah from Greenleaf Geek Dice. Leah is also Canadian-based, and I actually first found out about her when she started a Kickstarter for her Keyfish dice, which are based off of this one epic scene from the internet sensation Critical Role. She also did another Kickstarter, which my absolute favorite dice are from, which have the most adorable little kitties inside each die. You can pick between gold cats, black cats, and galaxy cats.
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen those yet. I need that in my life.
Right? I have the gold cat, and I think I have one black cat die.
I'm gonna get the galaxy cat just to complete the set for us.
So all of her dice are honestly spectacular, and we actually encourage you guys to check out her website at greenleafgeek.com. And if you're just as amazed as we are, you can actually use our code WDYK podcast. That is WDYKA podcast at checkout to get 10% off your order. The holiday season is fast approaching, so definitely check out Greenleaf Geek Dice for great gift ideas. Just don't forget to use our code or follow the link in our show notes for that 10% off. And then Kat can also use her 10% off to get herself her galaxy cats. All right. So, as usual, here's your fair due warning for this episode. Sorry, it's a short warning, but it is a doozy, as this episode does touch upon a lot of death, especially the death of children, as well as some human stupidity. Luckily, there's not much more than that, and I'm not getting super in-depth on exactly how people died, but I'm pretty sure people can imagine it from seeing James Cameron's movie on the Titanic and all the fun stuff we've all read or watched on that particular disaster.
I kind of laughed a little bit. I want to clarify. I'm not laughing about children's death. I'm laughing about human stupidity because it's just always.
Yeah. Okay, so for this first episode back, I want to talk about a tragic historical accident that happened 2 years after one of my longtime favorite historical events. Which I know it's probably sad to say that this is a favorite historical event.
Favorite being the Titanic?
Well, since I was a kid, like, the tragic sinking of the Titanic has always captured my interest. Like, I cannot explain why.
Listen, I understand. I get it. As someone who is a murderino and follows my favorite murder, I understand how phrases like that, like, how they come across and also what they actually mean. So, like, no judgment here. But for anybody listening, to clarify, it's like when we say that, like, our favorite tragic events, we're not talking about, like, celebrating that people died. Like, that's not the intent. It's just fascinating to learn all the things that led up to it and why it happened. And learning about these things is how humans have always gone about preventing, making sure that we know how to prevent it and keep it from happening again. So, like, that's what we mean when we talk about it in this respect.
Well, I did put in my notes, I'm like, perhaps it's because, like, one of our major modes of transportation here in BC is, like, the BC ferry between the mainland and the island. So, like, my childhood anxiety maybe told me to research the Titanic extensively to figure out why the unsinkable ship could have sunk to ensure that the boat I was about to be on couldn't have the same fate.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense. That makes so much sense. I totally get that.
Even though only one BC ferry has ever sunk.
That's also good to know. Go BC ferry.
Like, only one ferry has ever sunk from BC ferries. There's been a pile of, like, other incidents.
Oh, totally. Of
course. But, like, only one has actually sunk and only 2 people died on that one.
Considering the number of ships, considering the number of ferries that are constantly going back and forth from the mainland to the island, like, that's honestly, like, I'm a little bit surprised that it's only one. I definitely would have expected it to be more.
Right? Like, and
that sounds really bad.
And, like, the one is, like, only because, like, the guy wasn't navigating the ship when he was supposed to be.
How is that always what happens?
He was having a fight or having sex with his ex instead.
Whoa. I think we need an episode on that. That sounds so dramatic. What?
It's not, like, that dramatic because, like, nobody actually knows what happened, and even the judge was like, I don't care what happened. The evidence shows that you were not actually navigating when you were supposed to be.
And
so,
that's the part that really
guess
matters.
what? You're at fault.
Oh,
it's your fault that this happened.
Can you imagine?
Like, I don't care what you were actually doing, but you weren't doing your job.
Yeah, like, whatever personal drama is going on in your life, like, you were supposed to be navigating a ship and keeping everybody from, like, crashing. Like, that's,
like,
very clearly your only job.
Yeah.
Oh, my word. I can't, like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten into the shipwreck that you want to talk about yet.
Exactly. But yeah, so I'm not talking about the Titanic, though, today, even though I could rattle off, like, 50 million facts about the Titanic. Just off the top of my head, could tell you everything.
And we're also, I realize the meme is a little bit dead now, but it's also still kind of recent news. We're not talking about, actually, by the time this is posted, it's, like, even further removed. We're not talking about the submersible that sunk going after the Titanic.
Here's a funny thing.
Is a different one.
Here's a funny fact that I did just learn, though. So, before, like, years and years before the Titanic even sank, there was a book about an unsinkable ship called the Titan that sinks, but hit by an iceberg. Then the Titanic sinks, and now we have this submersible called the Titan that friggin'
Oh my word, it's art. It's art imitating life and life imitating art in just, like, a constant loop. Like,
like, who was stupid enough to freaking, like, name this submersible the Titan after the ship that, like, the ship in the book that sank, that then the Titanic sank, and now you fucking...
Everything about that is just, like, listen, I'm not superstitious, but I like to say I am a little stitious. Like, it's just, there are things like that where it's just, like, you have, like, how does that not, even if not, like, not going all the way to, like, jinxes and stuff like that, like, how would you not make the connection in your head about how this might be a bad idea? Like, how does that not trigger some level of self-awareness about what you're doing, about what you're trying to do? Like, I don't understand. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so today I'm telling everybody about the Canadian version of the Titanic.
You say that like I'm supposed to know.
I know. So she's not as famous, even though her sinking pretty much rivals / overtakes the Titanic in every single way.
Ooh, but isn't as famous.
No. Like, barely anybody knows about her.
Well, maybe we need James Cameron to make a movie about this one, too, and that'll fix that.
That'd be great. Can we get him to listen to this episode and take this over?
James Cameron, if you're listening, I have a pitch for you, and I only want a 5% cut because that's all it'll need to set me for life.
Exactly. All right. So this is the story of the RMS Empress of Ireland, who served her passengers for 8 years before the fateful night in question. The RMS Empress of Ireland was built as one of a pair of ocean liners in a new lineup by the Canadian Pacific Railroad for operation as their new Canadian Pacific steamship line.
Okay.
I know! The first trigger is that it's run by the Pacific Railroad!
Oh, and I'm thinking, like, wasn't the railroad, like, ambitious enough? You want to add, like, a whole steamship line to it as well. Like, there was, like, the Pacific Railroad was, like, a huge endeavor. Like, that's
Yeah.
a railroad. For anyone who's not Canadian and therefore doesn't know our history because no one else cares, um, the Canadian Pacific Railroad is a rail line that was built early 1900s, I think. Early 1900s, late 1800s, older than that. Way older than that. I'm super off on that. Built early stages of Canada, basically from one end of Canada to the other. The idea being that we would have like a mode of transportation that was reliable. Why is that the word I'm floundering on? A reliable mode of transportation, like all the way across the country, and that's where a lot of our towns and settlements kind of actually developed around, was like the stops along this railway station, right? So like it was a huge undertaking. A lot of people were exploited in the making of this railway. Like a lot of people were exploited in the making of this railway, and it has its own dark history, and it's like one of like kind of one of the unfortunate foundations of Canada. It's really like early foundational stuff.
Yeah, like it's
so yeah,
insane.
that was like a huge undertaking. So for them to like try to branch off and do like steamships as well is just kind of like wow. Like
yeah, well, this whole operation like started in the 1800s with
right,
the rail,
yeah.
like with the actual railway as well. When the CPR negotiated a steamship line that would run from Vancouver to the Far East, aka South Asia. So 3 ships were chartered by Sir William Cornelius Van Horn to begin the fleet, and it slowly expanded to add routes to Hong Kong, Japan, the Philippines, and Hawaii. All routes stemming from Vancouver and Victoria.
Like, this is what I mean. Like, they can't do anything in a small scale. Like,
everything
about the Pacific, like the railway is like, it's just everything is so grand scale and everything is big. Like in every way. It's like
well, and like they kept expanding.
You guys chill.
But then I was like, to keep it going towards our pretty ship. In 1891, the CPR in Britain contracted a mail service that would run between Britain and Hong Kong via Canada. So 3 ships were contracted for this service in the Empress liner line: the RMS Empress of China, RMS Empress of India, and the RMS Empress of Japan. All 3 ships sailed regularly from 1891 to 1912, when the RMS Empress of China struck a reef and was subsequently scrapped after being towed to shore. The RMS Empress of India ended her service in 1914, and the RMS Empress of Japan ended her service in 1922.
Okay.
And then in 1903, the company took over a line known as the Beaver Line, which ran civilian transport between Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the UK.
Of course it's called the Beaver Line. Okay. Just the most Canadian name they could have named it. All right.
So this line of ships included the pair of vessels that were built in Scotland: the RMS Empress of Britain, and our subject of the day, the RMS Empress of Ireland. Okay. Both vessels could hold up to 1,530 passengers.
1,530
passengers, yeah.
Okay.
So this included 310 first class, 470 second class, 500 third class, and 250 steerage accommodations.
Wow. All right.
The majority of passengers on these ships were immigrants from Great Britain and Scandinavia.
Okay.
So while I'm actually focusing on the RMS Empress of Ireland, I do want to quickly pop in a couple of not so fun facts about the RMS Empress of Britain, because it's just hilarious in the context of this whole story, okay?
Okay, not so... Okay, yeah.
Okay, so 2 weeks after the sinking of the Titanic...
Oh no, I see where this is gonna go.
The RMS Empress of Britain herself hits an iceberg in the same ice field.
Literally, what was going on? What was going on with the navigators in that ice field? Like, why do I feel like there's so many? Like, the Titanic, like, wasn't even the only one. Like, why? Like, guys, get better, please.
Luckily, she did not receive any severe damage to her body and was able to continue her journey.
Cool. So not only did they not learn from our story today, not only did they not learn from the Titanic, but they also didn't learn from their own other ship.
Well, hang on.
That also hit.
So a few months later,
oh my
in
God.
the St. Lawrence River, keep this in your memory though, the RMS Empress of Britain rammed into another ship and caused it to sink.
What was with those navigators? Like, what is going on?
I couldn't find much about, like, the actual, like, accident, so I don't have much information, like, on the casualties of this incident, but it's something to note for later.
Guys,
and this is not her first casualty, because she was then used in the First World War and sank at least 2 ships. A German and a French ship.
Was that one at least intentional, or did they just
the German one would have been intentional?
And ran into those as well? Like,
I think that the German one would have been intentional because that's the enemy. But the French ship, I'm like, that's an ally ship. So I'm wondering if that one was not intentional.
Did they all have broken compasses or something? Like, what is going on? Oh man.
So later in her life, she was renamed the Mont Royal, and she ended her service in 1930. So she was scrapped, and some of her parts are still viewable in the Sola Strand Hotel's Mont Royal Lounge in Norway, because she was used to build the fireplace as well as part of the ceiling and the window decor.
That sounds like an interesting hotel.
You're also going to want to remember that fact. Okay, so just remember that fact as well. So remember the St. Lawrence River and Norway with the RMS Empress, okay?
Yep. Navigational systems. Just top tier stuff back in the day.
Alright, but back to the RMS Empress of Ireland. So, being built in 1905/1906, she was an older ship, yet she still had, like, the right safety features of the time. So she had the 10 watertight bulkheads with 24 watertight doors that could close at a moment's notice, pretty much.
Okay.
So her watertight doors, though, because she was built in 1905/1906, they had to be manually closed. The Titanic's watertight doors, they did have a button that they could press, and the watertight doors could be shut automatically that way, because it was built pretty much in, like, 1911, 1912, before it was set sail, because Titanic, maiden voyage, she had 8 years under her belt.
Yeah, gotcha.
After the sinking of the Titanic in April of 1912, all passenger ships were given strict orders to undergo renovations to ensure new safety measures were put in place. The Empress of Ireland complied and was up to standards. So she couldn't make any changes to, like, the watertight doors or anything. Her watertight doors were pretty much as up to standard as they could be. She just couldn't make the changes to make it, like, electronically with the switches and stuff, right? But lifeboat-wise, she made the correct changes, updating from the 12 wooden lifeboats to 16 steel lifeboats and 26 wooden collapsible lifeboats.
Okay, so that's like a decent amount of lifeboats. How many people could each one
hold? In all, she had lifeboat room for 1,686 people. 280 more than she was technically allowed to carry on board. So she had lots and lots of room on her lifeboats.
So, so there should be no casualties for the ship sinking.
Yeah.
The face you're giving me says that I'm very wrong.
There should be no casualties, correct.
There should be no casualties. There's no, like, with that fact alone.
With that fact alone, like,
assuming
you could just say random people who are in the water as you're paddling away.
Yeah. Like, so she's up to date. the ship, right? She's up to date. She's meeting regulation standards.
Yep.
She has enough lifeboats. It's not even a question about whether or not they have enough lifeboats.
Oh, yeah. No,
she has enough lifeboats.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. For every single person on that ship, stowaways or no.
Yeah.
Like, they're like presuming that they have like an adequate safety plan about like evacuating everybody into said lifeboats in order to do that quickly and efficiently for that many people. That's going to be difficult kind of no matter what you do, but like as long as they have like a solid safety plan, there is no reason for anybody to die, barring some like, you know, beams falling from the walls or like the ceilings and crushing people or stuff like that. Like everyone should have a chance to escape.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what is about to go really, really wrong?
So, as I said earlier, she had 8 years of safe travels under her belt.
Yeah, so she should know better. Okay.
So
cool.
Before the tragic accident in question, she had carried 119,262 people to Canada and 67,838 people to the UK.
Okay.
So she's done very well. Some of the passengers that she had carried before included Mr. Marconi, the inventor of the Marconi radio, which was actually installed on board the ship itself, as well as the founder of the Boy Scouts, Mr. Robert Baden-Powell.
The Boy Scouts has its own very interesting history, which
right?
would be a whole other episode, but like, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this last trip of hers started on May 28th, 1914, with her departure from Quebec City at 16:30 or 4:30 Eastern Time.
Okay.
So p.m. in the afternoon. Just lovely evening, like late evening. You're going to have like a nice sunset as you're departing Quebec City.
Mm-hmm.
She was heading right? She was heading towards Liverpool with 1,057 passengers and 420 crew members, so about 2/3 of her total capacity. There were only 87 first-class passengers who had booked in, but that doesn't mean that there weren't any important people on board, which was actually like a theory that I had for why this tragedy wasn't as talked about as the Titanic. But when I looked at the actual list of passengers, there's some pretty interesting people on board. One of them that actually really intrigued me is that Lawrence Irving and his wife Mabel Hackney were on board. No, nothing.
No. Wait, hang on. Names are not my friend.
Anyone who's interested in early British stage work would recognize the last name, as Lawrence is the son of Sir Henry Irving, who was a famous stage actor in Victorian England. I think we talked about him in one of our Bram Stoker, when we talked about Mary Shelley and Bram Stoker, I think.
He was in that episode?
I think so. I think we talked about him in there.
Okay. Being a stage actor, I would have guessed that he would have been in the Macbeth episode. With the cursed plays and the cursed movie.
No, because I think he was friends with Bram Stoker.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he probably would have...
Because I think Bram was working for Henry Irving, if I remember correctly.
For Henry Irving, not Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence is his son, and so they weren't as famous as Henry yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right, they were working their way up to becoming that famous. So they were over here doing a not a road trip, but they're doing a theater a theater show trip. Yeah, tour. Right.
Yeah.
Other famous first-class passengers included Sir Henry Seton Carr, who was a former member of the British House of Commons. He was returning home from a hunting trip with his hunting prizes.
Okay.
His prized moose head was found in the 1980s after the sinking.
A moose head. Okay. All right.
That would be gross to find, I think, after.
I don't feel like it would have been particularly prized at that. Well, actually, maybe even more so. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I was going to say, given the condition that it's in, I don't think it would be, particularly, prized at that point. But given the circumstance, maybe.
Yeah. And then a famous Canadian of the time who was on board was Henry Lyman, who was the head of the largest pharmaceutical company in Canada of the time, along with his new wife Florence on their belated honeymoon, which was 2 years after their wedding.
Aww.
Because they just couldn't find the time.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. We had our honeymoon 1 year after our wedding, so like I understand
Yeah.
circumstances happen.
They may have wanted to, I don't know, wait a little longer before
Yeah,
their
they
little
probably
honeymoon.
yeah, that's a little unfortunate.
Yeah.
Our honeymoon.
Second class was only booked just over halfway with 253 passengers. Many of them, 170, were Salvation Army members and their families on their way to London for the Third International Salvation Army Congress. The most
Oh
full
boy.
was the third class accommodations with 717 passengers. They were a mix between Canadian and US immigrants who were either heading back to the UK to visit relatives or to resettle in their homeland.
Okay.
138 of all of the passengers were children.
138. Okay, so there's like 700,000. What was the total passenger number again?
1,000 of passengers,
Yeah.
1,057.
1,057.
Yeah.
And you said 138 were children?
Yeah.
Okay, 138. So like 10% of the. Okay.
The captain, Henry George Kendall, had just been promoted to being captain of the vessel, and this was his first full trip in command.
Oh no. Okay.
So
that's a really rough first trip, buddy.
Yeah. By the early morning hours of the next day, the RMS Empress of Ireland started to sail into the St. Lawrence River when they spotted the lights of the SS Storstad, a coal cargo ship from Norway, several miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
boy.
already
Okay.
we're coming back to our friend, the RMS Empress of Britain.
Yeah, which both of those things did not, yeah, okay.
Yeah. At the time, the weather was clear, but soon fog hit and both ships had their vision obscured. Both ships had been using their lights to communicate with each other and switched over to foghorns when the conditions changed.
Okay.
At about 1:56 a.m., the SS Storstad suddenly collides with the RMS Empress of Ireland on her starboard side around midship.
So they'd been communicating.
Yes.
They were aware of each other's presence.
Yes.
And they still somehow collided?
Yes.
How did they're communicating through foghorns? Like how?
Well, first they were communicating with their lights as to, hey,
Yeah.
I'm here. Hey, I'm right here. And then they're doing with their foghorns to say, this is my location.
Yeah, sure. So like how
Don't come too close to me.
How do you forget that there's a ship there? Like how did they
Well,
how did they not?
so I don't go too much into detail about like the he said, she said, basically, of it all.
They point fingers at each other
right?
and they blame each other for
Basically, because the captain of the Storstad was like, oh, we were port to port. And the captain of the RMS Empress is like, no, we were starboard to starboard. In which I'm like,
oh my god.
Storstad guy, you hit them on the starboard side. You were clearly starboard to starboard.
Yeah, one of these is clearly like demonstrably correct. Like I just
Like you clearly
guy.
are lying.
Dude. Okay, so it wasn't the faults of the Empress in this case then.
Pretty much, yeah. And it was
As far as we can determine.
as yeah,
evidence.
and like even like
Okay.
with the investigation afterwards, it was clear that the Empress was not at fault, basically. That the Storstad was deemed pretty much at fault, that the Empress made some mistakes, but that the Storstad was like the major at fault of it all.
Yeah, they're the ones who T-boned the other ship.
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah. Okay. So the Storstad stays afloat, but the Empress is extremely damaged. Captain Kendall immediately gets on his megaphone and shouts at the Storstad to keep her engines at full power so that their ship can keep the hole plugged. Which makes sense.
Okay.
Like, just
okay.
keep
I
this
hear the
freaking
logic.
plugged. Like, you keep your ship here. Don't
Keep
let
us
any
afloat
water
for a little
in.
bit. Yeah.
So we
let any
can,
water.
like, do our shit.
Exactly. So just buy them a little bit of time so that they can get into the plenty of lifeboats that are waiting for them that they just need to get into.
Yeah. However, the currents of the river have
I
a
hear
different
that.
plan.
Oh no.
So the Empress continues in her forward motion, and the Storstad is pushed away from the larger passenger ship about 5 seconds later.
Oh my gosh.
This retreat from the damage allows 270,000 liters of water per second to begin flooding into the passenger ship.
No, 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 no. Okay. And they have doors that they can shut, but they have to manually run around and shut them. And 5 seconds is not enough time to
Yeah, there
do
was
all that.
no time to do anything with the watertight doors. With the amount of damage that there was, you couldn't. The watertight doors were doing nothing.
Oh no.
Anyways, like even trying to shut
Okay.
them,
Regardless.
nothing. Like that wasn't going to do anything. Most of the passengers and crew on the lower levels drowned almost instantly as water flooded straight in and the ship started to tip towards the damaged side.
Mm,
Those
okay.
who were accommodated in the upper decks were woken up by the crash and immediately rushed to the lifeboats.
Okay.
However, due to the tilt of the boat, any lifeboats on the port side could not be deployed.
Oh no. Okay.
Those that were attempted ended up crashing into the side of the ship, dumping the passengers on board directly into the freezing waters.
No. Okay.
5 starboard lifeboats launched successfully, but a 6th capsized while being lowered.
5.
5 lifeboats could be launched successfully.
Out of all those lifeboats, 5. Oh man. Okay. Good gravy.
Are you ready for this timing?
Yeah.
5 to 6 minutes after the initial collision, all power was lost to the Empress.
That makes sense.
10 to 11 minutes after collision is when she fully went over onto her starboard side, allowing any currently surviving crew and passengers to try to climb through the portholes onto her port side, where she sat bobbing for a few moments, seemingly stable. At around 2:10 a.m., her bow suddenly popped up for a brief second and she fully sank, throwing hundreds of people into the freezing waters.
Ugh. And
the
got
whole
5
thing took
lifeboats.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. That's so fast. That's, oh wow. Okay. So okay, but like if the other ship hadn't pulled away so soon, it would have potentially bought them enough time to like actually get people out and close the doors and like
Maybe?
not necessarily.
Maybe I don't know how much time it would have bought, but
I mean,
maybe if another like 10 minutes. I mean, no matter what though, the Empress was going to keep moving that forward motion because it was going to take them time to be able to turn off the ship.
Turn off the engines, yeah.
To turn off the engines, and for the Empress then to, with the currents, to slow down enough, right? So they would have to have somehow, with the Storstad, kept that ship in that right position. Like, no matter what, it was maybe going to only be like another, like a minute or so tops of them being able to, like, plug that hole.
Yeah.
That the water was going to come rushing in very quickly no matter what. That there wasn't going to be a lot of extra time.
God, gravy. Like, of all the safety protocols that they had in place, the renovations that they had just done, like all the lifeboats, like everything, and like even still, like bad communication was still enough to like take out this many people. Like that's so wild.
All right, so of the 1,477 people total on board, so taking the passengers, adding on the crew, 1,012 lost their lives on the morning of May 29th, 1914.
I mean, when you said 5 lifeboats, like, that's what I expected, but, like, oh, God, like, that's still so many. Good grief. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm like, I could easily go into detail as to, like, why the ship sank. Full outcome of the inquiry into the tragedy, because I did find like the whole inquiry and was going through it out of curiosity, and like all of like why we don't talk about this tragedy the same way as we do about the Titanic, but like I kind of wanted to like focus a little bit on like the people who were on board this ship. So in the show notes I will have links to like the full inquiry, with all like the info and like the possibilities of blame and stuff like that came out in that full inquiry, just so that people, if you guys have,
if y'all are curious.
Yeah, if you're all curious, I'm also gonna have a couple of links for like passenger lists and like all the bios and stuff like that, because people have written in to different websites with stories about people who they knew who were on, like family members and stuff who were on the ship and various things that it's super interesting. I'm not going through everybody because, as I said, that's a lot of people. I'm just taking like a few different ones that I found like super interesting to me, kind of a thing.
Some that you're particularly touched by.
Yeah. And just ones that I'm like, I think these ones almost have like the most impact for this medium, right?
Gotcha.
But like there's so many that I was just, like super touched by that I'm like, I can't fit everybody in.
Yeah. I get you. So definitely go check the show notes, and check out the bios of all the other people who lost their lives in this accident, because that sounds like, that sounds really cool that people banded together to put all those out there for people to learn about these people.
Exactly. All right, so let's start really sad. Remember how I said earlier that there were 138 children on this ship?
Yes.
So the stat that hurt me the most is that only 4 of those 138 children survived.
Oh my gosh. 4. We're like, oh, that almost makes me like curious about, like, because you said the people in the lower decks, like, obviously, were the ones that were first hit with the water as it was like rushing into the ship. That almost makes me wonder, like, how they had decided about who was staying where, if like families were in the lower decks or something like that only 4 escaped.
I will be talking about some of those. So to compare the Empress to the Titanic, 128 children were on board the Titanic.
Yeah.
67 of those children were saved.
Okay, so they really focused on getting the kids out first.
Yeah. Well, so the Titanic had just over 2 hours to save their passengers. The Empress only had minutes. But there's one huge difference. The Titanic was alone in the waters with all the other ships further away, not listening to the communications. The SS Storstad was right fucking there.
And they just didn't help? Wait, I thought...
There was another ship right fucking there. They weren't that far because they were helping get passengers off. The Empress's surgeon barely survived, got on the ship and was helping with passengers.
Oh my gosh.
And stuff like that.
Okay. See,
the St. Lawrence River's not that fucking big. It's not an ocean.
Oh my gosh. See, I kind of forgot about, like, the other ship. I kind of just assumed that they were dealing with the damage of their own ship, and that
their ship was not that damaged. They were floating okay.
Like they were
they
were
had
helping,
damage,
but
they weren't at risk of sinking.
Okay. But like, oh my gosh.
So like they kind of could have like immediately started like pulling down ropes and like trying to help save people pretty much, right? Like and like pulling people like and stuff, right? Where I'm like,
and they just didn't?
I don't know how much they were doing. I'm like, because I'm like, of course, like in the inquiry, they're trying to make themselves out to be like, we were doing great.
It's totally he said, she said situation, because it's not like either side like wants to take complete responsibility for this. But also, the ship that crashed into them was also the one that said that they were port to port and not starboard to starboard. So like,
I can't.
There's already other information that they're either like not being honest about or that they were just dead wrong about, which kind of makes me. It makes me a little suspicious of them. I'm not gonna lie. Of just like them just being kind of neglectful, like not like intentionally malicious trying to get anybody hurt, but like just being neglectful and just like not taking responsibility for
like
it.
In my head, I can just see them like looking over and be like, "Hey, you okay down there?" As people are like treading in this freezing water, like
or just like not.
Or like throwing
just,
like the
like not cluing in
like,
how
just, like,
serious
throwing,
it was
like,
in the
the
moment
life,
or something.
like those like inflatable rings and just throwing them out, but throwing them too far away by accident. kind of a thing. Like,
Listen,
they would have had lifeboats.
uh,
They could have put their lifeboats down for people to climb into. I don't know if they did or not. Like, actually did or not. Like,
that's true, because they would have had that too. See, I really want to believe the best in people. I really want to believe that everybody on that ship, like, was doing their best and had all the best intentions. But, like, just the way that everything that you've said so far comes across, it certainly comes across like the other ship was just either particularly oblivious or neglectful, and just, like, could have, yeah, it feels from the information we have here, like they could have done so much more to help so many more people survive.
Yeah. I'm like, I get that, like, kids probably wouldn't be able to survive in the freezing waters as long as an adult.
No, the shock would kick in so much.
The shock would kick in so much worse. But I'm like, there was a fucking boat right there. Could they have done more? Could more kids have survived? Like, if more had been done by another boat or whatever, right? Like, that I'm just like,
yeah.
Or even more adults or what, or like, whatever. Like,
I mean, this is kind of the unanswerable question, right?
Yeah,
like
that I'm just like, there was another boat right there, and this many people died. That is a technically worse accident than, like, worse death toll than the Titanic.
Yeah.
And another boat was actually right there.
Like, literally right there. Like, oh.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so one of these young lives that was lost was Miss Dorothy Brooks, or Dolly. She was on board with her dad, Frank Percy, and her mom, Henrietta Westwood. The family had immigrated to Toronto in 1905, just after Dolly was born. They were on their way to England as Frank was in the Salvation Army Canadian Staff Band, and they were really excited to get to see family while over there for the Congress. So Frank was staying in the second-class accommodations with his bandmate George Felstead, while both the families were in third-class accommodations together as per what, like, the Salvation Army could pay for.
Okay.
Because they could pay for, like, second class for the actual Salvation Army members and their band, but then they could help either pay for or help pay for third-class accommodations for, like, the family who were coming along.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
During the tragedy, Frank tried desperately to find his family, but had to finally jump overboard to save himself as the ship started to sink.
Oh, honey, I can't imagine.
Henrietta held on to Dolly's hand as long as she possibly could until they both ended up in the water. She was rescued and reunited with Frank. 9-year-old Dolly was never found.
Oh, sweetheart. Like... So Dad tries to find them, can't, realizes he has to jump into the water to save himself, does, survives. Mom is with child.
Yeah.
They jump into the water together.
They're holding hands until they both, until they end up in the water together. It doesn't necessarily mean that they jumped, but that they, that they were holding on until they were, like, swept into the water at least.
Okay, but there's only, like, 4 kids that survived.
Yeah.
And she wasn't among them.
She was not among those 4 kids, Dolly.
So it's pretty clear. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Like,
but both of her parents survived.
So,
which I'm like, those parents, awful. Like, especially Frank,
survivor's guilt for life, like, for sure.
Was like, I didn't have to go. Like,
yeah. It's like, if we knew this was going to happen, we wouldn't have gone on this, like, what was supposed to be a family trip for, like, Dad's work, right? Like, off.
Well, and, like, the Salvation Army's not really work. It's volunteer, basically, right?
Well, it's a charity organization, but there's people who, like, work for it, though.
But the staff band is a volunteer.
Oh, that is a volunteer position?
Yeah. Okay.
So then, like, especially then, it's like you're trying to do a good thing for the community.
Yeah.
And then this happens, like the survivor's guilt. Like, you'd never get over that. Like, that's oof.
Yeah. Another one of the young children who did die was little infant Willie Leakes.
Aww.
Willie had lost his mother earlier in the year when she died in Ontario, and he was being taken by the Burroughs family over to England to his grandparents.
Okay.
He had a father who was a cotton cloth finisher, and two much older sisters who it seems were back in England. I think his father was still in Ontario, but his sisters were in England.
So was this kid traveling alone then?
Well, the kid was traveling with the Burroughs family, who were apparently neighbors of little Willie's father, but not much is known about like his family life other than the fact that the Burroughs family was taking him on this trip.
Okay.
To see his grandparents. Get away from work. Yeah.
Child needs to be raised by the grandparents because mom's passed. Okay.
Well, so his dad, I guess, was like, hey, I can't take care of him and be working. Like, I'm not able to raise a child, so I need to send him to his grandparents back in England.
Totally fair, totally valid. There's no way you could guess that it would turn out like this.
Yeah. So his body was identified by the Canadian Pacific Railway. And only one of the 4 members of the Burroughs family who were taking him over to England survived the sinking.
Oh, man. So, like, of the entire rest of the family. Okay, so being the lone survivor, your entire family is gone. And not only that, but your neighbor's kid.
Yeah, who you were in charge
who you were in charge, like, entrusted with.
Yeah.
To, like, get them to their, like, new home in England. Like, oh, like...
Like, that poor man, like, losing his wife.
Yeah.
And then his son.
Good grief, yeah.
After being like, okay, I can't take care of him, probably, like, we're just speculating, but probably being like, I can't take care of this kid, so I'm going to have to send him to his grandparents.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and I'm going to have to entrust, like, the neighbors. I can't take time off work, probably, because you got to make ends meet in this time.
Well, that's exactly it. And you think that you're doing, like you're trying to do the best that you can by your kid. Like, that's what it, all boils down to, is that you're trying your absolute best to do, like, everything right by them. And so you think that this is, like, the best and safest solution. And then something, like, completely unforeseeable like this happens. And, like, ugh.
So,
like, anyone with kids on this ship, anyone who, like, knew kids on this ship or, like, was with kids on the ship who ended up surviving, like, I can't imagine the grief, like, just the overwhelming grief. And there were so many of them, like...
Yeah. So, while Dolly and Willie were just 2 of the 134 children who tragically passed, the bandmaster's 7-year-old daughter was one of the 4 lucky ones to be saved.
Okay.
So, Grace Hannigan recounted her tale as she was on the train later that same month. She ran with her parents, all dressed in their night clothes, to the top of the ship. And all 3 of them were almost immediately thrown into the water.
Oof.
She never saw either of her parents again as she sank deep into the water before coming back up to grab a hold of a piece of wood. She spotted a lifeboat and called out for help before being dragged on board. She then later saw, like, another woman holding onto a piece of wood and never saw that lady again. She was the last survivor of the Empress of Ireland, passing away in 1995. She was raised by her...
1995?
Yeah. She was raised by her uncle and every year would go place a wreath on the Empress of Ireland's cenotaph in the Mount Pleasant Cemetery.
That's really lovely.
Yeah.
It's like, that's really, like, that's so tragic, but it's good to have, like, little ceremonies like that.
Right? But, like, that would be so scary, like, just to be yeeted off of the ship.
Yeah. Thrown from the ship into the icy water, you immediately...
Like, and you're going, like, deep down into the icy water.
Yeah.
Like, probably thinking, like, okay, I'm about to die.
Yeah. No, immediately lose your parents.
Yeah.
Come back up, see someone else, they disappear, you're alone. Like, that's a lot for a little kid to go through.
Yeah.
That's a lot for anyone to go through, but, like, especially a child.
Right?
Man. If I was her, I'd never go on a boat again a day in my life. Like, there's no way. You couldn't pay me $1 million to get on a boat after an experience like that.
No. I would be just like, nope.
Just absolutely not. I am landlocked now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not traveling anywhere. I'm just here.
Yeah, I'm just
Ugh.
done with life. Like, I'm just gonna be like, right here, thank you. But I think
I am
it's,
hiding out in my house and never leaving. Oh man.
I think it's just so sweet though that like every year she went and put a wreath and like remembered everybody.
Yeah.
Like I bet you she was
Yeah.
probably like friends with Dolly. Like probably like when like because
Mm.
like her dad was the band master, so probably the kids would all go play while the her dad ran the
Hmm.
band practice and stuff, right? Like
Yeah, but I mean,
and like she was probably
if
lucky
you
because she was probably on that second like in that second class, right? So she would have had that little bit higher
a better chance of getting
yeah,
away.
like a better chance of
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. No, I hope that that yearly ceremony for her was a really healing experience because like yeah, I can't imagine growing up knowing that that's what you've been through. Like
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
let's kind of take a look at some of the older victims that I noticed had some interesting lives before their unfortunate deaths.
Hmm.
So the first one is Miss Alma Asafrey. So for those of you guys who are interested in stats, only 41 of the 310 women on board survived. Once
41
again,
of 310.
yeah.
These ratios are awful. Like
So
they're just
once again, though, like I mean, like on the Titanic, right? Like women and children first. So
yeah,
more women,
like,
more children survived because they were like, we have time. We can actually like segregate everybody and
we have time
pick and
for
choose.
discrimination on this ship. Like
Like let's pick and
God.
choose who gets to be
Oh my
saved.
God. That's
This ship
that's
is
so rough.
like
That's
everybody
so
is
awful.
like
That shouldn't have ever been a choice. Okay.
this ship is like nature takes its pick,
Yeah.
and
This is just a
unfortunately,
complete free for all from the sounds of things. It's like everything, all the security features are like out the window. Like it's just like die, like survive
yeah,
or die. Like that's it. Like
yeah.
oh man, oh man.
So Miss Asafrey, of course, as I said, is not one of these women that could survive.
Oh.
But she's got a very interesting life. So
Mhm.
she was born in 1888, one of my favorite years.
Is it because it's the same forwards and backwards?
No.
Nope, 1881. Oh my god. Oh my god. No, that's so dumb. Wait, you said 1888.
Yeah, that's Jack the Ripper's year.
Oh my gosh. I thought you said 1881.
No, 1888.
1888, Jack the Ripper. Yeah, that makes sense.
But she was born in Glasgow, Scotland, so she was not born anywhere near Jack. um,
I feel so dumb now. Like I was just like I was still focused on like the last thing that you had said, to be honest.
so she was born in Glasgow, Scotland, where her father started Scotland's first chocolate factory and owned many well-known candy stores and tea rooms.
Willy Wonka?
Basically, like he was Scotland's Willy Wonka. So she herself was a talented artist who studied at the renowned School of Art in Glasgow.
Cool. Okay.
Where she became engaged with her teacher, Alexander J. Musgrove, in 1913.
Okay. Low-key problematic, but you do you. Live your life, I guess.
So Musgrove, who was age 31, had just been chosen to be the principal at a new school of art in Winnipeg, which he started at during the summer of 1913. Alma, at age 26, joined him there in late April or early May of 1914.
Okay.
So basically she joined him like just before this whole thing. And then for unknown reasons, she decided to head back to England with the fateful voyage of the Empress of Ireland. And Musgrove had to go identify his fiance's body.
Oof. Yeah. Oof. Yeah. That's rough.
So she is buried
probably
in
going
a
back
cemetery.
for a vacation or something.
Well, for a vacation, or I don't know. Like there's no record as to why she went back so quickly.
Okay.
Right? Like it's very quick that she like within like a month.
Okay. Maybe
going
like
to Winnipeg that she's going back. So maybe like they had a fight and they broke up. But then he ended up being maybe he was like the last point of contact that they had for her. So he's the one who had to go
I could
identify,
also
or
see,
an illness or something in the family, maybe.
going back to tie up loose ends with the move or something, like, who
Maybe,
knows?
yeah.
There's all kinds of reasons.
So she's buried in a cemetery in Glasgow.
Okay.
And then
Close to, like, where the rest of her family would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the last passenger that I wanted to touch on is Susanna Grafton.
Mm-hmm.
So she was 78 years old at the time of the Empress sinking, and she had traveled in second class.
Okay.
Born in London, she actually immigrated to Bowen Island, just off the coast of BC, with her 4 children at the age of 50, after her husband passed away. And her family was actually considered to be one of the early pioneers of Bowen Island, where they farmed, logged, and fished, while Susanna was known to be a kind, neighborly woman and a great member of the Salvation Army. Which I found was, like, really interesting. I'm like, hey, cool, like, you're, like, a pioneer of, like, an island, like, really close to me, like, that is super kind of cool, like, of, like, a piece of history from you.
Like, one of the founders of our, of our local area. Huh.
Yeah. So she was actually headed back to England to visit her sister for the first time in 30 years, when she died alongside the other passengers of the Empress.
Oh, no. For the first time in 30 years, like, what are the chances of that? That's rough.
I was like, oh no, like, honey. I'm like, I feel so bad, like, for your sister. Like, it was like, oh my God, like, she was on her way to see me.
Yeah.
For the first time in 30 years, and she's now passed away, like. Like, yes, she lived a good long life, at least. But.
Yeah. It just reminds me of how, like, my closest sister lives a few hours away, and even still, like, every time I leave her place, I text her as soon as I get home to let her know I'm home safe. Like, with that kind of relationship, like, I can't imagine, like, expecting your sister to come see you, and then she just doesn't show up. Like, just everything about that situation is just so awful.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna skip over, like, talking about, like, a lot of, like, the men in depth, because I'm like, they got to pretty much survive a lot more than the women did.
Yeah, significantly. Yeah. The higher ratio of the men sounds like.
But I do want to talk about 2 of the crew members of this vessel, because I found one that was like, dude, you should not have been on this ship.
Oh no.
Because you may have been the reason. And another one that I'm like, dude, you have my heart. And I want your story to be told.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So I'm going to start with the one that I'm like, you may have been the reason.
Oh, no.
Because one crew member named William Clark had his fair share of horrific tragedy on sea.
No. Oh, you mean he might have been the reason, as in he was a jinx kind of? He was the reason? Or like he messed up, he was a reason?
No, because he might have been a freaking jinx. He could have been fucking cursed.
Oh, no.
Because 2 years earlier, he survived the sinking of the Titanic.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so he survives the Titanic.
As a crew member.
His job is to be, like, a sailor. So, like, what else are you going to do but, like, get to work on another ship? And then he gets on
the freaking Empress, which is pretty much, like, a worse incident. Like, just as bad / worse. As I'm like, dude, stop sailing on ships. Like, you've now been on, like, 2 massive fucking nautical disasters. Just give it up.
Was on both. Okay, did he survive the Empress though?
Yes.
Like, okay, and then he stopped sailing after that.
He better have.
I would have cut my losses. I would have been like, no, that's 2 now. Like, we're just the Poseidon does not like me. I'm gonna stay home.
Like he fucking better have, because I'm like, dude, that is like 1 too many giant disasters for you to be on.
Like, I can't imagine the struggle of all the people who worked on the Titanic and then, like, had to go, like, it's their career. Like, you know, how many transferable skills are they?
Dude, women and children first. You shouldn't have.
Okay. So you're thinking, like, he's had experience with this before. He should know who to save first.
Well, and I'm like, technically, and he could have been one of those people who snuck onto a lifeboat with the Titanic.
So, like, you're thinking he technically may not have
He may
been
not have
like supposed to die.
survived honorably.
But also the Titanic wasn't filling their lifeboats too. That was part of the problem.
Still,
they could have fit more people on those lifeboats.
Still, he may not have survived the Titanic honorably, is what I'm saying here.
No, but I don't blame the people who didn't.
Know,
though,
but
you know what
still.
I mean? Like if I'm literally in freezing cold, like ice water in the middle of the ocean, crew member or not, if I'm seeing a lifeboat that's like half empty right beside me, I'm climbing it.
Hang on. He worked as a stoker and a fireman in the belly of both ships. There was a fire on the Titanic through the whole thing. So he really should have been down there working and saving the ship for the entire time.
One person wasn't going to be able to save the Titanic.
No, but like one person to add to the multitude of other people who were doing it.
I hear you, but also I just know if it were me, my self-preservation skills would definitely have kicked in at some point. And like by the time I realized that it was bad enough and I wasn't going to be able to turn it around, I'm climbing in a lifeboat.
Yes, but we're going to then compare him to the next guy after I give you, because I'm like, in a way, I'm actually kind of glad because he did give me one of the best quotes to describe the differences of the sinking of the two ships since he got to see both of them in real life.
Yeah, I mean, that's a unique perspective.
So he said, the Titanic went down straight like a baby goes down to sleep. The Empress of Ireland rolled over like a hog in a ditch.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Like, I just burst into laughter when I heard that. As I'm just like that. I'm like, all I can see now is a hog rolling over in a ditch.
That is the most irreverent. Like my dude.
That is just one way to describe a ship sinking. Like, if it wasn't for so many people dying on it,
it would be funny. It would be funny if there wasn't like 100,000 people that died on that hog rolling in the ditch. But like, my dude, like that's just so. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know.
Okay, but as I said, now let's compare him to this other crew member that I would like to touch upon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? My new favorite boy, Thomas Corrigan.
Okay.
So, on the Empress of Ireland commemoration website, Thomas's grandson wrote in with a legend that has been passed down in his family that I would like to share because I really hope it's true.
Mm.
So it's known
I like legends.
that he perished in the sinking.
Okay.
But the legend in the family is that he was a first-rate swimmer.
Okay.
But he died saving the life of a young lad who was a neighbor of his back in England.
Okay, so the boy we confirmed survived.
So this other guy is confirmed to have survived.
Okay.
Probably I don't think he was considered a child.
Okay.
I think is that right? I think he was probably a little bit too older. I'm not sure what they're considering as a child, age-wise at this time. But that Thomas had definitely died in the sinking, and that this other guy definitely survived.
Yeah, so we know that for fact.
The legend is that Thomas was a first-rate swimmer, and that he died saving the life of this other guy. Did the other guy ever? I'm not sure. Anything to support that? I'm not sure because I can't find any other mentions and stuff to corroborate it. I've tried searching and stuff, right? Yeah. And stuff, right? But that it seems like it might be that maybe this other guy went up to the family and was like, "Hey, I want to thank you guys because he saved my life." Yeah, and that was the last time I saw him. That seems like a valid way that the family would end up with this story. Yeah. So it can't, any other explanation would just be, passed down through the generations. He was a great swimmer. There's no way that he just would have, he would have just drowned on his own accord. Our boy was a great swimmer. Well, he must have drowned because of something. And then, kind of spitballing different ideas and kind of well, maybe it was because of this one, maybe it was because of that. I could see it becoming legend over time in that sort of sense. But because it's specifically this other guy, then that makes me wonder if
makes me lean towards like, okay, well, that's enough details that made me feel like that is legit. I will say that at the same time, it almost doesn't entirely matter because it's a legend. Like, it's not the kind of thing that hurts anybody. And if it makes, like, if it gives this family peace, then like, I'll count it as true.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, I'm like, to me, I'm like, many people have said that like the ship's surgeon, who barely survived himself and then immediately got to work once he was safely onto the Storsad, is like the hero of this whole tragedy.
Yeah.
But I'd also like to toss like Thomas's name into the ring, and any other like crew members or even passengers who may have like risked their lives or
And
like
lost their lives.
and like actually lost their lives to try to save others.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm like, I don't think that like any tragedy like this kind of tragedy has just one hero.
No, exactly. Like anything like this, like there's gonna be as many people like trying, like, you know, running purely off of survival instincts and just trying to save themselves, as there are people who are like going out of their way to try like to try to save everybody else, right? So like, yeah, no, I agree with that.
I don't want to just hear about this surgeon. I want to hear about Thomas. I want to hear about like others, right?
And
like,
that's not to say that the surgeon didn't do a great thing.
No, he did a great thing, right? Like, yes, he was helping, like, say, like he was tending to the wounded. He was tending to the dead that were pulled up onto the ship, right?
But also, we want to leave space for all the stories that sunk.
Let's also talk about those who actually literally killed themselves to save others.
Yeah. Like those people are heroes too. Yeah. And I think those stories are like, I think part of the reason why they get less attention though is that because, like, you know, someone could have sacrificed their life to save someone else, and that other person still may have died just because of the circumstances of the situation as well, right? Like, so I wonder how many of those stories there were that we're just never gonna know because they weren't successful, but they were still heroic attempts.
Exactly, right? But like, let's just like acknowledge at least that there were probably these heroic attempts happening.
Oh, for sure there were.
Like, instead of just focusing on the
this one guy
surgeon,
saved all these people and also survived himself. Let's totally let's honor him. Absolutely.
Like, he probably has enough of an ego. He's a surgeon in the 1940s, in like the early 1900s. He's got an ego.
Doctors are next to gods at that point, especially. Like, fair enough. I hear ya.
So if you guys also would like to honor these probably unsung heroes,
yes,
please do check out in the show notes where I will have these lists of people and their stories. And if you would actually like to visit the Empress of Ireland herself, you actually can.
Really?
Yes, you can, but I do have a asterisk there. So if you would like to visit her, please check the show notes where I do have a link to the Parks Canada historical site details. The shipwreck is diveable, but please respect the fact that it is a grave site and a historical site.
Artifacts, this is not a tourist destination.
Yeah. Artifacts are not to be removed without proper authorization, and guidelines must be followed. Basically, do not fucking touch anything. Like, that is pretty much it. Don't touch anything.
So the ship is still underwater. You can scuba dive to it.
I don't know if you can actually fully scuba dive, but it is diveable because people have like, there were a lot of issues of people diving it because it's in the St. Lawrence River. It's not like it's the Titanic that it's like you have to fully on like submarine and use robots to get to. You can actually dive down to it. So there will have been a lot of issues of people before quite a while of people literally stealing shit from the ship. And then finally it became a historical site. So like if you actually take a boating trip out on the St. Lawrence River, there is a buoy that tells you where it is.
Okay, cool.
And stuff, right? And basically warns you, this is a historical site. Do not fucking, like, fuck with it.
No touching. I don't know what it is about, like, historical sites like this where tragedies happen and people thinking that it's okay to treat it like any other tourist site. Like, it's not like you're in Maui picking up a pebble to take home with you. Like, you're, like,
even
like people died here.
don't pick up pebbles and shit because that is just fucking with nature.
Yeah, also don't, like, but you know what I mean though. Like
When you're at the beach,
one stone on
don't
a beach is
steal
not
shit
gonna be
from the beaches either.
but like one stone isn't gonna be that
No,
big
do
of a
not
deal.
take it.
None.
No,
But
you're
what
not
if-
supposed to. Like, you're literally not supposed to.
But the pretty tiny
I
rocks.
know,
Okay, I'll
but
stop
you're
taking
literally
pebbles.
not supposed to.
I hear you. I'll stop taking pebbles.
Trust me, with somebody who has actual education in this.
Yeah.
No
I get
touchy.
you. I know.
Unless
I
it
usually
actually
don't take them all
tells
the way
you
home.
you're allowed
Okay.
to. No touchy. I had that problem with my mother in the Titanic Museum.
Okay, for like stuff like
We
yeah,
actually had like a big iceberg thing, and it literally had a big sign that said, "Do not touch the iceberg." And my mother was like, "Oh," and reached out her hand. I'm like, "There's a big sign that says, do not touch." And she's like, "But look, other people have touched it." I'm like, "Do not be the other people."
Okay.
And she touched it, and I'm like, "I'm going to fucking kill you."
I mean, like.
And then there was one that said you could touch it, and I'm like, "See, this one says you may touch it in this particular exhibit." And she's like, "But now I don't want to touch it." And I'm like, well, look, it says you can touch it, so now I will touch it because it says I may touch this iceberg.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I don't understand like the mentality that people have around like these sites of massive tragedies, like trying to visit the Titanic, for example, just for funsies is like a like what like yeah, it's like the Anne Frank house, how they have a guest book there, and people have written like petty personal notes, or
wasn't
like
it Justin Bieber who wrote something stupid in it?
Name drop anyone, but you know what I mean.
I wouldn't name drop. I'm sorry, it's Justin Bieber.
He was a dumb kid. Like saying Anne Frank would have been a believer was like it was bad, but. Like, yeah, but like stuff like that. Like, tragedies happened here. Let's be respectful of them. I'm also thinking of like the people taking selfies outside of Auschwitz, and it's like that's like kind of it's that same kind of mentality, for these different places.
Yeah,
like,
please do not do that.
These are not tourist destinations. Let's treat them with a little bit more respect than that, please. Like,
yeah.
Come on.
On a similar thing, there are also monuments at various cemeteries. I believe that you can find the same kind of thing at the Parks Canada, which I highly recommend visiting to pay your respects to the victims of this tragedy if you're in Quebec. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for today's episode of What Do You Know About? So Kat, how are you feeling after learning about Canada's Titanic, which technically isn't Canada's Titanic, since the real Titanic did sink off the coast of Nova Scotia, so we can partially claim her with a good portion of her grave sites being literally in Nova Scotia.
Oh my god.
And yes, I am bitter about it. What of it?
No, I couldn't tell that you were bitter about it at all. That didn't completely just come across it.
I'm sorry, but like both wrecks are kind of both Canadian.
They both happen within Canadian territory. I hear you. I get it. I do. Like, oh my god. Yeah. Wow. I mean, that is dark and that is heavy. And honestly, I kind of feel there were a lot of obvious wrongs with the Titanic. You know what I mean? Like, there were a lot of obvious red flags that it was very easy for people to rally around and be like, well, like, this this should never have happened because of this. Like, and that I feel like is part of what drew people to the attention of the Titanic. And also it claimed it was unsinkable and then sank. like, there's gonna be, on her maiden voyage, like, there's gonna be talk about it because of that kind of stuff. Like, that's very headline worthy, like, headline worthy, like, that comes across, and I'm sure it sells papers very well. With this, it's kind of just dark. Like, an accident happened. Sure, there were probably a few things that could have made it a little bit less bad, but they did all the right things, and a lot of people died anyway. And that is a really hard thing for people to talk about, and for people to want to acknowledge, and for people to admit. So I kind of feel like I understand why we don't talk about it as much as the Titanic. You know what I mean? Because there's only so much that we could learn from this that we haven't already learned. Whereas with the Titanic, there were like big obvious mistakes
Well,
and a lot of hubris
and I think
that went
that
into it.
Kelly, because I told our friend Kelly about it when she was over the other
Mm-hmm.
day, and we were kind of talking about it as well. And we were like, for at the time, we were looked at it and went,
Mm-hmm.
okay, Titanic had already happened, and when
Mm-hmm.
we look at big tragedies, we get very quickly desensitized to things. So we already had the big
Mm-hmm.
tragedy, so people probably were like, whatever, it's another one.
Less of a shock factor.
Less of the shock factor. We were like, okay, yes, there were some big names on there, but there weren't big American names on there. And even at that time, America was the main
Media
media
over
driver
Canada.
still.
I mean, some things never change.
And we were also like, okay, timing wise, we were very close for World War One. That
So it's just so much else on people's minds.
There's too much else on people's minds that it probably just didn't get the same traction because there wasn't and stuff, right? Like with the Titanic, I think that there was another like massive murder happening at the same time as the Titanic, that the Titanic still had the big news lines and then the massive murder had the smaller headlines. So probably this was just the reverse, that there was other stuff happening that had the bigger headlines and this had the smaller headlines that it just got buried.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't like the shocker event that was happening.
Yeah, and I mean, like, with this many lives lost all at once, you'd feel like it would be, but given, like, yeah, like you said,
we already had the
Titanic,
Titanic, so it was like, oh, another big shipwreck, great, whatever. There wasn't a huge name on it.
I don't even know so much, like, great, whatever, but, like, oh, another one. Like, it kind of feels the same way. This is going to get real dark for a second, but it kind of feels the same way I feel sort of now about school shootings.
Yeah.
You know, like,
that's what I mean, with, like, the desensitization, right? Like,
yeah, like every now and then, like a really, really particularly bad one will like take the media by storm
for 24 hours and then it's gone.
For 24 hours and then it's gone. And then there's like so many school shootings happening in the States, like all the time. Like I can't even like so many, like so many. I like it's like so many that like you can't give out that kind of emotional energy for every single story because we just as humans don't have that in us. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Yep.
Like we only have so much energy and attention and things like that. And we're all still trying to struggle through our own daily lives as well at the same time. And like, it's all these factors combined that like, it's like, you hear of another one and you get this dreaded, like, oh, it happened again. But then like, there's not much else, especially as a Canadian, like viewing it from the States. So there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do as a bystander about a shipwreck like this after it's already happened. So like there's this whole like sense of just like, it happened, it sucks, but there's really not anything I can practically do about this, so I'm gonna just have to move on.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately there's not really a good way to end off, but
no, I mean, this is really, you chose a really dark episode to come back with.
You're welcome. That's my job in life.
Actually was like, I've got a shipwreck for you. I really want to see your reaction to it. Let's use it as episode 1. And I was like, all right. And it's because like I'm into pirate stuff. I was expecting something from like the 1700s of some mystery ghost ship or something. And no, we get Titanic part 2. Like,
you're welcome. Don't worry, I've got some piratey stuff for you for the next episode.
Excellent. I have creepy dolls. Let's do it.
All right. So yeah, thank you all for listening and coming back to visit us again. We will be back soon with, as we kind of just said, with spooky season. Just getting started. So yeah, we have some amazing stories coming your way. And don't forget to go check out Leah's amazing handmade dice at Greenleaf Geek using our code WDYKA podcast in all caps to get your 10% off. Link is in the show notes. See you guys all on the weird side of history.
Bye.